IST 2016. This is interviews, music reviews, and more. This is The Hodder Show.
What is up, everybody? We are Rolling Audio here today on episode 314 of The Hodder Show. I hope you guys are doing absolutely fantastic. Thank you so very much for tuning in and clicking that play button on today's episode of the podcast. I got a really wicked episode for you here today. I do every single week right here on The Hodder Show. I'm sitting down with Arthur Unk, who is a badass writer who writes mostly horror, but also a little science fiction, a little romance, a little this, a little of that, and also is a contributor to the Grey Rooms podcast with some stories that they've used for some of their episodes. And if you guys know me, I am a huge fan of the Grey Rooms. It might be my favorite podcast. So we, of course, dive into that and the episodes that he's worked with the Grey Rooms, as well as talking a little bit about just the podcast itself and how much we both are huge fans of it. A little bit about the Discord. We have some questions from the Discord channel of the Grey Rooms. And then we talk a little bit about Arthur's journey into writing, how he writes, how he approaches things. We really break down all aspects of Arthur's writing on this episode. So I hope that you guys enjoy it. It is really, it was just a blast getting to chat with him. So stay tuned for that. Before we jump in real quick, I want to thank everybody for their support on last week's episode of the show, in which I debuted another new segment, The Albums That Made Me. And I talked about Cold's Year of the Spider. That was so much fun to do. I had a couple people message me say that they really enjoyed it and that, you know, it was fun to kind of hear my perspective. And a couple of times, apparently, they thought I got a little emotional. And I'm like, man, I didn't really catch that. So that was cool to, that they felt that. And they felt how much love I had for these songs that I was explaining and telling stories and being nostalgic and things of that nature. So that was really, really, really awesome and really fun to do. So be sure to check it out. The Albums That Made Me, last week's episode, the debut of that segment in which I talked about Cold's Year of the Spider, and be sure to keep an eye out for those in the future. But without further ado, we're going to jump into my chat with Arthur Unk. Let's get into it. You have heard his work on one of my favorite podcasts, The Grey Rooms. You have also seen him as a contributor on Horror Tree, as well as probably seen some of his work if you are very active on Twitter, because he has an awesome Twitter account in which he's always posting cool stuff and poetry and short stories and things of that nature. We have a lot of ground to cover. I'm super excited to welcome on to the show, Arthur Unk. Arthur, what's up, brother? How you doing?
Oh, it is a beautiful, chilly night. I'm enjoying it.
How cold is it where you're at?
Think Ice Station Bravo, but colder.
It's a little chilly.
Yeah, it was on a night just like this one that I got the inspiration to write that story. So lots of fond memories.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, just diving in head first, like there's so much stuff that we have to talk about and so much ground to cover. But because you mentioned it, let's just start with your work with the Grey Rooms. You are an OG key holder, and also you've written a couple stories for the Grey Rooms, you know, one here and there.
Yeah, there's a few.
Well, that's it, man. And I mean, with Ice Station Bravo, like for those of you who are not familiar with the Grey Rooms, it is a badass horror anthology podcast, which you should go check out. If you're checking this episode out, there's probably a pretty good chance that you do know the Grey Rooms. But the first season of the Grey Rooms, one episode that really stood out to me immediately. I mean, I loved all the episodes, you know, but one that really stood out to me was episode 6 of season 1, which was Ice Station Bravo, which was one of your stories. Walk me through Ice Station Bravo. Obviously, you know, I know the premise of it, but for those listening, what was Ice Station Bravo? Where did the inspiration for that come from? And then how happy were you with how it turned out? Obviously, talking a little bit about, you know, when you have a story that you write, you maybe picture how things go in your head. But then when someone is talented as the crew with the Grey Rooms, Jason, Graham, and everybody involved there, kind of bringing it to life.
Well, the thing that I loved the most about Ice Station Bravo was it was really a bunch of it was like the Wild Wild West.
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody, it was like whatever goes. And I was approached by the then lead narrative author. His name was Brian Black. He found me on Twitter because, as you said before, Twitter was my main social feed to where I was putting out micro stories, micro poetry.
That's the term, micro, I was saying.
Yeah. And I was getting a lot of word of mouth that way. So I get a DM in my box and he's like, hey, we're starting up this podcast. It's kind of like Quantum Leap meets Tales from the Crypt. And that was my description for it. And he was like, hey, could you write me a horror story? And I was like, yeah, sure. Click, 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 type, send it off to him.
And it was about
10,000 words. And he goes, bro, awesome story. Can you cut it down to like 3,000 words? And I'm like, yeah, I'll just eliminate the 2 subplots and this over here and all that. And I send it back to him. He's like, bro, this is a great story. We love it. We're going to use it. Can you rewrite it in first person? By the way, you got about 12 hours to get it back to me.
Oh, geez.
So I rewrote the whole thing in about 10 hours, made it a first person perspective. And the rest was history after that. The inspiration behind it, one of my favorite horror movies, The Thing, John Carpenter's version,
yes,
and Resident Evil. So I kind of had those 2 things in my head when I was going through it. And a lot of people want to tag it as a zombie story when really it's an alien infestation story. Because at the end of the story, you have like this voice in the main character's head, and that was the spores from Project Frankenstein taking over that person's body. And yeah, everything ended in flames and death, and yeah.
Well, and it's so
beautiful.
interesting because, like, you know, when you start off with the story, like, you know, it's essentially, dumbing it down really, really quickly, it's, you know, a team of people that are guarding this research station, and turns out there's some shady things going on there. And I'll let you guys, you know, check it out, those listening, because I do implore you to go check it out. And, you know, one thing that I noticed that grabbed me right away, and I think it's something that I always catch when it comes to, you know, with writers specifically, is the character building and the world building that you did within the first, even like the first couple of minutes of the story. Right away, I cared about every single character that was mentioned, and this world you created within the first couple of minutes. It's like, holy cow, this is right away. It grabbed me. Was there, obviously you mentioned some things that inspired that. Like, was there anything specifically as well that inspired that, like from like your own personal life? Or?
Well, I've been accused of taking my real world experiences and translating them into stories. So while I've never been to an Arctic research station, I've been cold. And at the time, I was on a annual training with my reserve unit, and it was the middle of February, and it was cold. Oh my God, was it cold? So that's how I was writing it. I was literally under a blanket typing, freezing my ass off. So that's how I established the scene. Now the people in it, because I'm going on, I hit my 20th year of service this year. So I've been in the Army for 20 years. And a lot of the people in there were just familiar tropes.
Sure.
Because you got to have something familiar in the story. So you always have someone with a nickname, you know, that's a familiar military trope. So I had a guy named Lucky in it. And then everybody always calling each other by their last names. That's another, you know, it's like Army's like one big high school anyway. Everybody just calls each other by their last name. And then to give it some realism, I stuck a couple of my friends in it. So Howard, Hardy, and Hardgrove represented myself and 2 of my friends who went through Correctional Officer Academy with me. And of course, I gave us all glorious deaths. So
is there any other way to be?
Exactly. I was like, we're going down in a blaze of glory. And funny thing about Ice Station Bravo, it's also where I have my first voiceover or voice acting credit.
Right.
Yeah, because I played.
You played yourself, right?
No, it was my friend. I wanted my friend Hardy to record the line, and he was like, "Whatever, man." He's like, "I'm not going to do that. It's stupid." And I was like, "Fine, I'm going to play you then." Yeah.
Yeah,
So
you had. That's right. I forgot about that. That you had a glorious death cameo.
Yeah, and it was just a one-off line too. It wasn't like I was asking them to read, pages and pages of material. I'm like, I just need one sentence. So he missed out, and I took all the glory. So screw him.
Well, I mean, you wrote it. Come on, you should take glory for sure.
I'm probably going to kill him again in another story.
Can you kill me in a story sometime? That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I'm sure I could work one in there. I got a few
death
things
for me somewhere.
Yeah, I got a few irons in the fire. I'm sure there's a TJ that can get blown away somewhere.
Exciting. There's a couple of things you mentioned there that I definitely want to come back to. But one thing I would be remiss not to say, just because of something you mentioned, the fact that you've been in the armed forces now for 20 years. So thank you for your service, first off, because that's especially being in it so long, like that's thank you for that, because I know that you obviously are, like you said, right now, you're freezing and you're
it's part of the job. I don't know what led me to it, but here I am.
Well, and I want to keep going with the gray room stuff, but like you even mentioned like correctional officer training, and I know you have some medical training as well. Like you've led a very interesting life, my friend.
Oh, I've been everything from an insurance salesman to a warehouse worker. I've done stuff door to door. I've been a recruiter. I've been just all over. I've been a truck driver. I mean, for my season 3, episode 6, The Ride, that borrowed heavily from when I was a truck driver, because that whole setup from Albuquerque to Phoenix, I mean, that came straight out of me witnessing a bunch of people on the side of the road with the signs held up like, "Oh, give me a ride to California, give me a ride to where," that's where I got the inspiration for that. So, I mean, I just take stuff from my life and twist it around, turn those intrusive thoughts into stories. Right.
Kind of expelling those thoughts, and it's funny because like that's, to be honest, that's one of my top 5 favorite episodes from the Gray Rooms. And that's a very exclusive list because there's a lot of fantastic stories from the Gray Rooms. But The Ride was one that, like you had mentioned, that you pulled from when you were a truck driver. I spent a lot of years working on the highway at one of I basically had a service center. So I don't know if that had something to do with it for me as to why I love the story so much, because I can totally relate to, seeing people on the side of the road with a sign and someone picking someone up. And I see it all the time. People would come in with hitchhikers and buy them meals and stuff. Like I'd see that kind of stuff all the time. And I'd be like, man, what if that person turned out to be not who you thought they did or who they were?
But he had Bud Light.
Yeah, exactly. like what if, but with The Ride, you also touch on kind of some more supernatural type stuff. Where did the inspiration for that come from?
I'm a huge fan of H.P. Lovecraft, so I'm always enjoying supernatural type stories, especially anything that has to touch on like elder gods or things that are just beyond understanding, or anything in that realm. That's why when the Gray Room started introducing things like the Far, and I was like, oh, okay, here's my opportunity to slide this in, because it seemed to be a direction that they were heading anyway.
Kind of that more, bringing in the more, more like kind of supernaturally type stuff, and that like the elder gods and stuff like that. Yeah, that was that was something that for me even too, like I kind of started to sink my teeth into more as well, where it's like, man, like things are getting very interesting. If you're listening to this and you haven't checked out the Gray Rooms, you're seriously missing out.
Well, sometimes I write these stories as a love letter too. For like The Ride was my love letter to JM, the guy who does all the music for the Grey Rooms, because I specifically wrote a part in there. He's such a fan of rock and roll, and I didn't know how he was going to do it, but I knew if there's anyone that could, I put my main character actually singing a Bob Seger song. And I was like, I don't know how they're going to do it, but I know JM can. And he pulled it off to perfection. No copyright claims needed.
And man, that the beginning of that episode with the riff that he pulled out for that one, I was like, what is this? So good.
Yeah. He just told me, because I sent him a private message, after the story came out, and I was like, dude, you nailed that soundtrack. And he goes, I got a total 80s vibe from your story. And he's like, I just went there. And I was like, well, I did have a good Twilight Zone reference in there. So
for sure.
You want to see something really scary? Yes,
dude. And the performance on that episode from everyone involved was just, fantastic. But one thing, when you were truck driving, was there ever a time where you like picked anyone up, or was that always kind of something you were hesitant on? I'm just curious with the story, with the inspiration for that.
I never had the opportunity really, because I would drive by and people would look so sketchy. I'd be like, yeah, I don't want that in my truck. They look like they have bugs. I want to go to sleep tonight.
Yeah, man.
Some people that have been traveling for a long time, they got some road wear on them, and I'm like, I'm good. I got my podcast I got my iPod with 20,000 songs on it. It'll keep me busy.
Yeah, you enjoy about talking to people and hearing about their life, and trust me, I know. Those kind of people come in all the time and have baths in our sinks and stuff, and it's like, yeah, okay. It's definitely a interesting, but it was so cool with The Ride, like how the twist obviously in that story. And I don't want to necessarily give it away, because again, I want people to go check it out. But is that something that you kind of you like to do with your writing? Like, do you like to have twists and turns in there and do something like super unexpected?
Well, you got to it's give and take. A twist is cool if if it comes from the story naturally. So you can always feel when something's forced. Sure. In my opinion, you can always feel like when they're trying to shoehorn something in there just because of, plot armor. You can't kill this person because they're protected by, quote unquote plot armor. Mm-hmm. No. If it's natural and it feels natural, I'll put a twist in. But when I was writing that story, it started out originally as something else. I just wanted to write a bad guy, and I wanted something bad to happen to the bad guy. Mm. And I was like, how can I make this story work? And then I heard a joke, and it made everything come together. And the joke was, guy driving down the road picks up a hitchhiker in the car, and they take off, drive down the road. The hitchhiker turns to the guy and goes, hey, thanks for the ride, but how do you know I'm not a serial killer? And the driver turns and says, well, the chances of two serial killers being in the same car is astronomical.
I love that one.
Yeah. So from a bad joke to combined it with that story, I was like, okay, now I have the bad guy, I have the premise. Now I just need to figure out, what happens at the end. How do those two elements collide?
And it collides all right. Again, guys, you got to go check it out. And I wanted this to be almost like a little teaser, and that's one, it's one of my favorites. And the Grey Rooms has so many amazing episodes. And,
the narrative story, the narrative storyline that was running up at that point.
Yeah.
My story was a pivot point in the actual narrative storyline. So not only do you get like a premium, nice, juicy narrative story that actually has a lot of meaning, then my story is attached to it. So it just kind of like you're already riding that high, like, what the hell just happened? And then the ride comes along and hits you right in the face, right from that first opening riff. You're just like, okay, this is something special.
For sure. And one definitely that is super special. I mean, you and I have talked about this a little bit already, but that same season, episode 19, A World Worth Saving.
Yes.
Is another one that is definitely a favorite of mine. And man, like, just walk me through A World Worth Saving and where all that came from, because I know there's a lot to unpack here with that episode.
Well, A World Worth Saving originally came from the idea behind it was more along the lines of, you ever heard of the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher?
I have not, no.
Yeah, well, it's a series of stories about a guy who's basically a modern day mage, modern day wizard.
Okay.
And he goes around and sort of protects his little area that he's assigned to, which is the city of Chicago and the surrounding area. He's kind of assigned to protect it from any supernatural elements. So that was the genesis of the idea behind A World Worth Saving. I wanted to take a hero who fought supernatural things, but he did it on a global level. And this was a guy who's had a lot of experiences, done a lot of things. And this is kind of like his final, he meets his ultimate adversary.
Probably the most ultimate adversary you could meet.
Yeah. And a lot of people get it twisted, because even though I name drop in that one and I name drop a pretty big name from HP Lovecraft lore, that was just what the creature was calling itself. That wasn't actually the creature itself.
Oh, okay.
Because the creature itself was more inspired along the lines of Clive Barker's Hellraiser. In that theme, because I worked in, the chains and the hooks and all that stuff. And it's just the creature was using that name because that was the only thing that the human mind could comprehend, so I got a little bit of a flack for using it. They're like, oh, that's not how Lovecraft would have wrote the story. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I wasn't writing it as a Lovecraft story. And I'm glad you picked up on that.
It's like, you're right. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah. It's like, high five. You figured it out.
I wouldn't have got that. Like, mind you, I'm not a huge, I mean, obviously I mad respect. Like, I've never dove into the H.P. Lovecraft stuff too much, but like, yeah, for the people that don't know, that name, whether you know H.P. Lovecraft or not, is instant recognition of how ominous, how big. Yeah, it's like, oh man, how big this is not good. Yeah,
yeah, and it just kind of just adds that element to it, because it's just, we can't know what we don't know, so our mind plugs in the gaps, and that was the gap that it filled, was with that name.
With a name that is synonymous with evil and bad things, folks.
Yeah.
But walk me through the main character a little bit. Yeah, walk me through the main character a tiny bit here, like where, obviously, like you talked about where the inspiration came from, but.
Yeah, the main character, I wanted him to be kind of like an elder figure almost. His name was Giuseppe, which is a name that both my wife and I favor. If we were ever going to have another child, we were going to name him Giuseppe.
Awesome.
And it's just, I wanted a cool Italian name, and I've been all over Europe. So the inspiration for the town that they went to comes from several little German towns. So I had this little European town in mind as he was going through. So everything feels tight and compact, and some of it could be a little bit isolated at moments. So, yeah.
Mhm. Well, and I know that just to briefly talk about it here for a second before we keep going, you are currently working on a novella that I believe might be tied in a little bit. Want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, the my first novella, it's entitled Tabula Rasa, is the inspiration for that came from this story because I enjoyed writing a world worth saving so much that I was like, how can I expand this into something bigger? So it was almost immediately after I wrote that story that I sat down and I just tried figuring out, well, how would this work on a larger scale? And about 2 or 3 hours later, I had like a 10-story outline done. And I just looked at it and I was like, I have to build this.
This
has to be done.
Yeah.
Yes. And I was like, and I just started writing, and other things have gotten in the way, but I've always been just chipping away at it little by little. The first story is done, Tabula Rasa, and then I got the beginning of the second and third stories started. So I plan on writing all 3 of them and releasing, 3 in one novel-sized book.
Okay.
So it's coming soon.
Okay, right.
I got a few other projects on the board, but that one keeps getting worked on every month. I get a little bit further.
Plugging away. Yeah, you're always writing. That's one thing. Like I know just from being in the Discord with you, like you're always writing and you're always working on different projects, and it's super admirable. And I mean, I'm hyped for when that happens. And I'm going to put you on the spot right now that when that novella does come out, let's have a chat again and break it down and talk all about it. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
100%. I'm there.
For sure. Would be a good time. But the last episode I want to make sure we talk about before we move on. I know I keep saying this, but another one of my favorite episodes for a lot of different reasons. But of course, the story, which is season 4 of The Grey Rooms, is Dead Air, which was the Halloween special. Where did the inspiration for that come from? Because let's tell the truth. You wrote that because you knew Jason would love it, right?
I would love to have claimed credit for that, me and the warden are tight like that. But unfortunately, that was probably one of the best coincidences that has happened since I got randomly asked out of the Twitterverse to write an episode. The inspiration behind it was, essentially going to be, how am I going to put this? It was like, once again, I'm stuck in the 80s. So I was thinking back to the movie, The Warriors. And there was a radio DJ in The Warriors that I was just absolutely in love with. I like the idea of a radio personality kind of narrating these people's journey,
sure.
Through the city they're trying to get back home. Well, then fast forward about 20 or so years, and there's a show on Netflix. It's called the Krillin Signal. And they do these really short animations, probably only about, 9 to 10 minutes long. There's about 5 or 6 episodes in the series. But the very first episode was a guy who was a radio DJ who had someone on his show under false pretenses because the radio DJ knew that he was a werewolf. And the radio DJ ends up capturing the werewolf in his studio. And I just combined the two together and Dead Air popped out.
Which is it's filled with just some of the best voice acting you'll ever hear.
When I saw who was doing all the voice acting, I was just like, oh my God, you got Joe Stofko, you got David Cummings, you got Eddie Cooper, you got, Graham Rowett's in there. And I'm just like, oh my goodness. I was like, I got the person that plays Belial. I got the person that plays Beckett. I got, I'm just like,
you got Bob,
yeah, I'm just, it was a little overwhelming. And I was so happy that they were able to work with the transitions that it gave them. Mm-hmm. Especially like Captain Dave's Fish and Chips. I guess that was super popular.
Yes.
Amongst the Grey Room staff. It just, there's just this ridiculous commercial that's dropped into the middle of this terrible story. And really, you can call it a case of mistaken identity. But it's just these little pieces that somehow all work. And that Captain Dave's Fish and Chips was a callback all the way to season 1, where the Grey Rooms kind of did a mid-season special. And the warden actually, some kids came to his house and they were like trick-or-treating.
Right, yes.
And it was kind of like, I love that the Grey Rooms added a little bit of humor. So I threw Captain Dave's Fish and Chips in there to try and, give a little bit of humor, break up the terror. Cause you have to stop pouring the water over the cloth sometime, see if they're going to respond.
That's fantastic. Oh yeah, man. Like it's such a great story. And I mean, I love that aspect of the humor too. It's one reason why the Grahams is my favorite podcast. Like just how it can be so intense and so articulate and well written, and but then also there can be some silly stuff in there too, which is it's dark and silly, and it's like, oh, this is great. Like it's
like Bob's obsession with haikus.
Yes. And of course the warden with his chainsaw, like, come on, like it's just, it's just great stuff. Like, how can you not? And when you just kind of wrapping up our chat about the Grey Rooms here, because I'll talk to you for another hour about it. So obviously, like, you were asked to be a part of it with the story. When did you kind of know that, like, okay, this is something special? Like, there had to be a moment where you were like, okay, this is really something here.
The moment I knew it was special was when I heard the preseason episode 1, Falling.
Right.
It was written by the amazing Mike Lee. And I listened to the quality of the story. I listened to the quality of the production, and I was like, this is going to be something special. And then when the first episode hits, season 1, episode 1, The Great War, in the beginning, you're just kind of like, everything's just kind of coming along, and you're kind of nervous. Yeah. And then it launches into the story, and you're just like, you hear the story of the Great War. And if I ever meet Graham in person, I'm going to have him talk to me about bully beef and the rats. But
rats.
I was amazed. And like, I made everybody that I was like, look, I'm going to be a part of this. Look, I'm going to be a part of this. This is amazing. Can you believe this is a podcast? This sounds like a movie. It got me hyped. And now, here I am. That was, they asked me to write the story all the way back in 2018, and here we are in 2021.
Wow.
And, I'm more of a fan than ever. That's why I try to do as much as I can on the socials, in the Discord channel. I try to just involve myself with the community as much as possible, because it's phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you're a huge part of that Discord community. Like I say this all the time, like one of the best decisions I ever made was, number one, becoming a patron. Mm-hmm. So the Grey Rooms Patreon, and also becoming a member of that Discord. So it was just like, it's almost like you think of people who are involved in a project of this level of quality, like, oh, these are like next level people. Like, these are people that like, oh, like, like, oh, I can't talk to them. Like, come on, and then you come in and it's like, everyone's just cracking jokes and like being super friendly. And it's like, what? Like, this is so awesome. And, there's running gags about geese and stuff. And like, what's going on?
Yeah, we have our moments. It's just, I've had nothing but good times. And I mean, even, the people who have multiple stories in the Grey Rooms, we all kind of band together.
Yes.
And we swap stories all the time, and we'll read and critique each other's works. We'll help with edits, we'll help with prose to script conversion. We'll, try to answer questions, just because, we understand what it's like. And me, I've had a few things in the gray rooms. So they kind of turned to me as the elder statesman. So as the most accessible elder statesman.
Sure.
And even this season, I've seen I've seen a list of some of the stories that's going to make it. And I was like, yep, I read that one. Yep. I edited that one. Yep. I critiqued that one. And I'm just like, oh my God.
Which is cool.
So,
it's like you're all kind of a part of the process, right? It's a really cool thing to watch, just from a fan perspective. I'm sitting there watching you guys go back and forth talking about stuff, and I'm like, man, this is crazy. Like, just
sometimes
wall,
Yeah, sometimes if you catch us on the Discord channel, we'll pull up scripts and read them live in the Discord channel, and we'll just have like a little roast right there. It's like, oh, you wrote this? Well, let's talk about it right now.
This line sucks. This is great. Let's focus on this. Like, like not that you're saying this sucks, but just, obviously critiquing, you got to be brutally honest and stuff. And that's what's so great about it, right?
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And I have an accountability partner in the gray rooms too. Tori Miller keeps me honest. So, I mean, she's just phenomenal. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, you have to be, right? Like, it's just, especially when it comes to when someone's sending you something. Like, I know myself personally, if I was to be in that situation, I'd have a hard time with it. Because it's like, if someone sends you something and it's like, that in one way or another, they poured their heart into that. And it's like, when you're critiquing it, especially if they want to submit it, right? Mm-hmm. Because like, the level of quality, and it's like, hey, this could be a great story, but maybe there's a plot hole here. There's something going on, like maybe there's a few things we can work on,
Oh yeah, most definitely. If you can't take criticism or critique, you have no business jumping headfirst into this game, because it's brutal. I think I've been rejected over 300-400 times for different stories. I mean, hell, I've been rejected by the gray rooms twice for stories. So
yeah, well, that's what I mean, right? And like it's like you, especially with the level of what you do, like I would think, like, reading your stuff, it's like, you've been rejected at all, really? Like, holy shit. Like, it almost seems crazy to think about, but like, with how long you've been writing and submitting stuff, like, I'm sure you've come across that before. I actually have some questions from the Discord here that I want to ask, because one actually from Tori, kind of on that note. So shout out to Tori, the community manager over at the Grey Rooms Discord channel. Go join the Discord channel, guys. Make the warden happy. Come on, let's get some people over on the Discord.
Exactly.
When you do come across something like, if your story gets rejected by a site or however you're submitting it, what keeps you motivated in that moment?
I know that I learn more from failure than I do from success.
Sure.
So I take a look at the story and I ask myself, I'm like, well, number one, did I follow the submission guidelines? Because some sites are so strict that they get bombarded with so many things that if you don't have it formatted properly, it's like, bloop, not even going to look at it.
Yeah, they won't even read it. Right.
Yeah. But when it comes down to the story elements, what keeps me going is I know in my heart that I'm a good storyteller. And sometimes some of the things I submit for just that isn't where my wheelhouse is. Mm-hmm. Fortunately for me, I've been accepted in a bunch of different publications for pushing stories. I've done science fiction, I've done romance, I've done literary fiction, I've done horror. So I kind of have a more broad background than normal. Mm-hmm. But sometimes your story just isn't a fit. And then sometimes they have a story, but they have two similar stories and somebody just wrote it better. It's just one of those things where it's like, well, you didn't want my story, whatever, I'm moving on. I had a story that was submitted to the Grey Rooms that got rejected. And I was like, okay, I submitted it to No Sleep and we'll see what No Sleep thinks of it. It's just, I know it's a good story. I just got to find the right market for it.
Right. And that's the thing too, right? Like with the Grey Rooms, it's like, especially when it's the type of podcast it is, where it's an anthology, like if you have like, is this story maybe a little similar to, or not even similar? Like, are there some elements maybe that are kind of similar to another story we're doing this season, or what are we going for with this season? Like, I'm sure there's tons of different.
There might be 13 werewolf stories that are submitted.
Right. So it's okay.
or we got too much science fiction horror this season, or we got too much, it just, you get lost in the shuffle sometimes. And I don't take anything personally.
Of course.
I take it as a learning opportunity, and I just go through, retool, and move on.
And that's what you have to do, especially when you're submitting stuff and you're sharing stuff with people. Like, you have to be willing to accept that, you might need to change some things, or, maybe a story you thought was a hit. It's like, oh, maybe it's not. Maybe you need to look at it again and kind of, go through it, and let's define it a bit more, maybe,
And I'll tell you what, my happiness lately has come from finishing projects rather than getting accepted, because here lately, I'm just so happy to finish a story, because it's like, it gives me a feeling of satisfaction. Like, okay, this is done. Now I know I have a beginning, middle, and end. Now I just need to edit it where it makes sense.
Right. Well, that's something you've been doing this year too. With the, what is the I don't want to mess it up. The hashtag Nanowrimo.
Oh,
what is
Nanowrimo?
Nanowrimo. What is Remo? Yeah. So what exactly, just to walk people through who don't know what that is, what exactly is that? And I mean, I know you hit your goal. So how is the process?
Basically, Nanowrimo is National November Writing Month. So basically, all the writers just get together and they say, look, for this month, I'm going to concentrate. I'm going to just put words to page, and I'm going to get at least 50,000 words written in the month of November. Mm-hmm. And that equates out to about 1,670 words a day, somewhere around there.
Which is crazy amount of words, by the way, folks. Like, that's a pretty decent.
And I mean, that's for standard publication, 50,000 words is a novel. Mm-hmm. That's the minimum amount that most people will take to be considered a novel. So we just challenge ourselves to put words to page and get the words out, and then go back and edit it all later. It can be on one project, multiple projects. And I was originally planning on trying to write my 50,000 words in my novellas, because I was like, oh, I'll just use NaNoWriMo. I'll finish off my next 2 novellas. It'll be great. And I did not write a single word in November.
Of course, right?
For my novellas.
Isn't that how it always works?
I was working on so many other projects, and I found myself just enjoying those so much more. And I think I ended up in the end with something like 59,000 words or something like that at the end. So I went over my goal, but it was phenomenal.
Yeah. According to your Twitter, it was 57,196.
Well, Twitter doesn't lie. So
I saw it on Twitter. It has to be true. Come on.
I know. I believe everything I see on the internet. And it isn't necessarily about finishing. It's about getting in the habit of writing every day.
Sure.
Whether you put down 200 words a day or you put down 5,000 words a day, it's just getting in the habit of writing.
Oh, for sure, man. Like, and it's inspirational to see, like, straight up, like, it's,
I got the bug for sure. I've been writing and editing every day since.
Yeah. I think your Discord has said editing until further notice for a while now.
That's because I edit every day. And another plug for our Discord, if you want to hear about some of the stuff that I'm writing, every once in a while, I'll drop it in the Cramped Fingers and Bloody Pages page. So I give little snippets of my favorite lines that make me go,
There's some cool stuff in there too, guys. Like, I'm a big fan of just being a fly on the wall in that conversation, because obviously I can't, like, I'm not going to be like, oh yes, blah, blah, blah. Like, I just like being a part of it to see it. But kind of on that note too, another question we have from the Discord here, I want to make sure we get to, Eric would like to know, and we've kind of already touched on this a little bit, but where does the majority of your inspiration come from? Like, when you get to a point where you're working on something and then this idea for a project comes? Like, where does that inspiration usually come from? Is it just kind of like everyday life, or?
Yeah, it just comes from the weird stuff that happens in my life. Let me give you a perfect example. I ruined Valentine's Day back in 2004. I have not had to buy a single Valentine's Day gift since 2004. And here's this story. You wanted an exclusive? Here you go.
Here we go.
So I was deployed in Iraq in 2003, 2004. And around that time, online shopping wasn't really as big as it is now, but it was around. It was in its infant stages. So I was using my very slow connection to try and find a Valentine's Day gift for my wife. I'm scrolling through page after page trying to find her something. And she sent me like a list of like 100 things that she wanted. I was like, I know better. I'm going to get her something special from the heart. So I confused my grandmother's love of Thomas Kinkade with my wife's hatred for Thomas Kinkade. He's a famous landscape painter. So I was on the Thomas Kinkade website thinking I'm going to find my wife a gift. And I found the perfect thing. It was heart-shaped. It had this little top you could take off. You could put candles or potpourri or something in it. It had this, it screamed, I love you. $70? Yeah, you're worth it, babe. Click buy. February 17th, I get to call my wife. I couldn't even call my wife on Valentine's Day. So February 17th, I call and I'm all excited because I knew I just bought a banger of a gift. I'm like, hey, babe, what's going on? I love you. Did you get my gift? And she just starts ugly crying. And I'm like, what just happened? I'm like, are you all right? Are you okay? And she goes, why'd you buy me an urn?
An urn?
So apparently I misread the description. And I sent my wife an urn for Valentine's Day, a heart-shaped urn. While I was deployed during, probably one of the most dangerous times that you could be there.
You bought her an urn.
And I bought her an urn.
Oh my goodness. Listen, man, I've been doing this for a long time, over 5 years to be exact. And that might be one of the best stories I've ever heard on this podcast as far as like bad gifts, things of that nature. That might be the best one. Oh my goodness.
So there you go.
Misunderstanding, but geez.
Yep. So not only did she hate Thomas Kinkade, but I bought her an urn.
So is that possibly a story we're going to see in the future, or the inspiration from that, or?
Possibly.
Maybe.
Okay. Perhaps. Okay. It might involve a gift of some sort that may be horrible in some way.
Oh, geez. Okay. Well, I mean, you're here to hear first, folks. So eventually when that happens, I'm going to be like, see, told you.
Yeah. This story sounds familiar.
Yeah. I feel like we've heard about this somewhere before. So the last question, of course, I have to ask is from a young whippersnapper here in the Discord. And he has a really serious, probably the most serious question I'm going to ask you all day. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
Arthur Unk would like to know who your celebrity crush is.
Guy or girl?
Any.
No. My girl celebrity crush is Rachel Ray.
Okay.
She's wonderful.
She's wonderful.
With her auburn hair and her shortness and her 30-minute meals.
Her 30 minutes.
I'd make her a 30-minute meal. Oh. And then on the dude side, Ryan Reynolds is my man.
I mean, come on. He's got to be, right?
Yeah. If there was anybody that could get me to, go that direction, I think he'd be a gentle lover.
I mean, I'm probably would have to go for me. See, for me, it's easier for guys. I don't know why. I'm just like, man, like Chris Evans, maybe,
Yeah.
I was a huge Adam Levine fan, not so much anymore. But
are we talking Captain America, Chris Evans? Or
I
are
mean,
we talking
come on,
Fantastic Four, Chris
no,
Evans?
we're talking Captain America. That's America's ass, okay?
Or the Not Another Teen Movie, Chris Evans, where he had the whipped cream bikini on. Is that what did it for you?
No, it was Captain America, America's ass. Come on. That's the Chris Evans I want. I wanted to bust in this door and carry me away.
I can see it.
And then I guess Anna Kendrick. I don't know. I don't really have a female one, I guess, too much. But I guess Anna Kendrick. But with getting back to some more serious topics, when did you actually start writing? Was it something that you was kind of always in the back of your mind that you wanted to try and do, or was it just one day you were like, I got an idea for a story? What was the catalyst to get you into writing?
I've written all my life. Growing up, I mean, the first probably horror story I ever wrote was in the third grade, where we had to mix and match different parts of animals and glue them together and then write a story about it. And I glued some dinosaur pieces and a turkey together and made the Turok and wrote a story about, the evil Turok, in the third
where
grade.
is that story? I want a Turok story. Come on.
Yeah, it's probably in my grandma's basement somewhere.
I think that needs to make an appearance. Come on. The Turok, that's awesome.
And then I didn't know what I wanted to be until I was 36 years old. And I sat down and I started just combing through stuff online, looking for writing contests. And I entered in a bunch of microfiction writing contests. And, at first I'd place, 10th or 30th or whatever, but then I started placing second and third. And I even won one once for a microfiction writing contest for 300 words or less. And I was like, okay. And I submitted my very first story called The Gamble to a online website called Spillwords. And they were like, oh, we like your story. We would like to print it. And I was like, oh,
that's
so
crazy.
It was a romance. Yeah, it was a romance story that broke into it. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to be a romance author. And then I found out I can't do that very well. Like, my idea of romance isn't what other people's idea of romance is. I'm way off the cultural base there. So I'm not going to do that anymore. I can, but I'm not going there.
Maybe one day,
Yeah. And then I was like, well, what do I like? I like fiction. I like science fiction. I like fantasy. I like horror. And then all of a sudden I got hooked up with an online magazine called The Horror Tree. It's at horrortree.com. Their editor over there, me and Stuart Conover, we've actually sat down and, broke bread together.
Nice.
And that's where a lot of my stories went in the beginning. And I would write these little 100-word stories for him called drabbles. And it's like crack. You keep getting that little hit because he's like, yeah, keep them coming. These are great. And I think 1 year I wrote like 24 of them or something like that. And it was just, I was just writing and writing and writing. And then Grey Rooms found me. And then, it just kind of took off from there. I got published in anthology called The Deadcades. I wrote a story about these people who grew up in the 1950s. It was kind of like a time when you were transitioning from rural areas into more suburban areas. And the wife found out that the husband was going to get fired. So she kidnapped this dude's boss and like tortured him down in the basement, bled him into like a tub because she didn't want to move. So she thought if she killed his boss, they wouldn't have to move because her husband wouldn't get fired. It was twisted. And then I did actually, the very last thing that I got published right before the Grey Rooms was I was in a anthology called 100 Days of Summer. And I wrote a story about high school kids, kind of like one liked each other. and they're trying to score alcohol for their party. So I ripped off the plot to Superbad, made it PG-13, and submitted it, and it got accepted into the anthology. Now here's the reason why it got accepted. The story was 99% dialogue with no tags. So the story that I wrote was almost 100% dialogue, just back and forth, but there were no dialogue tags. So there was no Brad said, he said, she said. It was just conversation back and forth. And I had 4 different characters in 2 different places. So it was real interesting how I structured that story. So,
which that all is like witchcraft to me, right? Like I just like, like I am not a writer. So for me, it's like, it just is such a, for lack of a better term, a bit of a mind fuck, just to like have you break something down like that, and were you always super into like structuring things that way? Or did you, obviously as you write, especially with someone of your experience, like obviously I know you get better. It's like anything, right? You do it more, you get better at it. You got to get reps in and you got to get words in. Were there any like books you read or any courses you took or anything like that for writing, or did it just kind of come naturally for you?
It always felt like a natural talent for me, but as with anything, the more tools you put in your toolbox, let me rephrase. Just because you have tools in your toolbox, you got to know how to use them.
Right.
So I did what most people did, and I just jumped in head first and found out I was in the shallow end. Thank God I didn't break my neck. I came back up, recovered, and before I dove into the water again, I learned to check my surroundings. I learned to make sure I was at the deep end. I started gathering more and more information. So I think the best writing book that I ever had is called Damn Fine Story by Chuck Wendig. If any aspiring writers out there, I 100% recommend you go get Damn Fine Story by Chuck Wendig. It is like my Bible of how I write. And from there, it's trial and error. Like you said, it's finding out what works, what doesn't. And eventually there's 2 types of writers. There's people who outline everything, and there's people who just make up everything on the fly. There's outliners, and they call them pantsers. And what I've come to find out is I kind of got a hybrid of them. So I will do an outline, but it'll be a real sketchy, thin outline. I'll just write out the action beats. So it might be just 1 word or 1 sentence, and then I will write all the stuff in between pantsing, but I'll make sure that I'm hitting all my action beats so my story stays focused.
It's like, okay, this person's going to do this specific thing, but how do we get there? How do we build that? Yeah.
Right. And I've only learned that in the last probably year and a half. I've been practicing doing that. And when I've been using that method, I started noticing I've gotten accepted a lot more to places. So I'm like, okay, this is what works for me.
Just things maybe a little more focused.
And I have 137 credits towards a master's degree in English literature, but we won't talk about that.
Let's not go there.
Yeah, because I'm one of those, I realized school was a scam and dropped out. So.
Yeah, let's not discuss that. But that's something that, like to me, being someone who's not, super educated when it comes to writing and things of that nature, like, it's something I've always, maybe it's my learning disability. I don't know, but I've always struggled with that. So to have someone like yourself who like naturally is just like, holy crap, like you see things. And not to put you on the spot, but like I sent you something that I was like, oh, I just wanted to get your opinion on it. And what you sent back was so like, I learned more in the first 30 seconds of reading through that with your like kind of the things you recommended in the edits. And I was like, holy shit, like I got a long way to go before I tackle something of this nature again. Like, and it's
some people
so
call it
cool,
seeing
right?
in the matrix. Some people call it seeing in the matrix. And, some people, they just have that natural talent. Me, the hardest part of it for me is I know how to do it. It's just finding the proper, the correct term to use. So, you might describe something as a dongle, but it actually has a technical name and a technical purpose. Can't talk purpose. And now, once you learn that technical name and technical purpose, you're like, okay, now I can fully explain to you what this is.
Yes.
But before, you just be like, oh, that's my dongle. It makes widgets.
And it's like, what the hell is that? Like,
Yeah. So now it's just, putting proper words to things, because I am taking steps into, I want to be that professional. I'm starting to learn a lot more about script work. I'm starting to learn a bunch of different techniques. I'm always listening to writers panels. I listen to everything from TED Talks to podcasts to try and see what everyone else is doing, find out what techniques work, what techniques don't, trying to learn the business side of things. So, pretty soon, I hope to have my name out there. I want to do this for a living.
get out of the cold.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No more frozen wastelands.
No more Ice Station Bravo for you.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. No more Ice Station Bravo.
That's it, man. I mean, like you've got the natural talent. Like, you know how much of a fan I am of your stuff. Like, and I mean, it's so cool getting to pick your brain about this. And I mean, like I said, once Novella comes out, because there was so much stuff we didn't even really get to in this conversation that it's like, I definitely want to have you back on again sometime to kind of shoot the breeze and maybe talk a little bit more about your interesting life you have led. But just real quick to put you on the spot here for a second, out of all of the work you've done, and it's a lot of stuff, do you have one in particular story or maybe a couple you can throw out that you would say are your favorites?
Yes, there are. One of them I can't talk about because I'm under an NDA, but when I wrote it, I literally wrote back to the person, this is probably the best ending I have ever written to anything. And it made me giggle uncontrollably. And I wish I could talk about it, but I can't.
Okay.
Outside of that, I really, really, really enjoy writing poetry.
Okay.
So anytime you see me writing poetry, whether it be limericks or any of the short micro poetry that I put up on Twitter, those are my absolute favorite things to write, because it comes directly from how I'm feeling in the moment. And it is an expression of, sometimes I'll look back in my history and it's just an expression of that day. It'll remind me of, man, who was I pissed off at? Oh yeah. Now I remember. That's why I wrote that.
Right.
Yeah. And it's just, anytime I write poetry, cause I've even wrote, new people that join the Discord, I usually try to say something to welcome them in. And for a couple people I've written limericks for, and they're like, do you have that copy and pasted somewhere? I'm like, no, I just wrote that in 30 seconds just for you.
Yeah. And that's just, that always, again, anytime someone new joins the Discord, I'm just like, okay, here we go. Cause I know it's coming. I sit there, dude. The other day, I wish I could remember who it was who joined up. Shout outs to that person. I can't remember. And like, I just so happened that I was in a place that has good reception and I was on the Discord during the day and someone joined up and I literally was like sitting staring at my phone on break. So I'm like, it's coming. And then boom, I was like, yes, like I love those little things you do. They're just so much fun to kind of know it's just all off the top of your head, right? It's just like, that's the sign of a true, someone with true talent, man. You can just off the top of your head like that. It's just crazy to me. It's really something to watch.
Well, guitarists don't stay, they aren't good because they only play during shows. So I take every opportunity I can to expand my craft. And that's just one of the little ways that I do it. It's kind of like when you go to the gym and say, today I'm going to work on ankles. Might not make sense in the long run, but guess what? I have really strong ankles.
Well, that's it. You're not going to have to worry about your ankles getting hurt. Well, one last thing before we go. I know you mentioned to me before that you are a big music fan, and my podcast, a lot of the times I talk music. So give me, as we're getting out of here, give me like your top 5 favorite bands of any genre, whatever you want to shout out.
If you want to go into more prog metal type stuff, Tool is my favorite. Industrial, I've always been a favorite of Ministry.
Nice.
You want to get a little bit heavier. I'm always a big fan of like Killswitch Engage, Hatebreed.
Nice. We love Hatebreed on this podcast.
If you want to go even deeper than that, I'm a secret fan of Cannibal Corpse.
I mean, come on, who isn't? Everyone loves Cannibal Corpse. Let's be serious.
Yeah, I was listening to them in high school back in the 90s. But I also have a fascination with underground rap. So I've posted the link out a couple of times, but I have a playlist of AMVs, and you'll hear just great people that I'm like, why aren't these people famous? You know, like Yuri and Raise God and so many others. I can't even name them all, but it's just underground rap and metal. That's pretty much what I listen to. Nice, and classical music. I'm a fan of Chopin's Nocturnes.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
So pretty wide like palette there.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Pretty wide palette happening there. So that's awesome, man. Just like your writing. And I mean, you know, again, I can't stress enough how much I enjoy your stuff and how much I've enjoyed chatting with you and getting to know you over the last month or so. And, you know, definitely want to have you on again sometime so we can shoot the breeze again on some stuff and about the novella when that happens.
Oh, yeah. Well, I appreciate you for having me on. Anyone that wants to follow me on Twitter, I'm at Arthur Unk Tweets. Anyone that wants to visit my website is arthurunk.com. And by the way, Arthur Unk isn't my real name. That's my stage name. Arthur Unk is a very bad dad joke for author unknown.
That's fantastic. I would never have known that if you didn't say that. There you go.
Now, it's just when I redo my security clearances, I have to put that name down as an alias, and it makes people laugh.
That is fantastic. All right, man. Thank you so much for the time. It's been great talking with you.
Absolutely. Anytime.
All right, guys, there you have it. My chat with Arthur Unk, or as you heard at the end there, maybe that is not actually his real name. But for the sake of this podcast, we're going to continue calling him by his writer name, Arthur Unk. Be sure to check him out down below. I'll have some links to his website and also his Twitter. Give him a follow. He very much deserves your support. Keep an eye out for his novella. He will definitely be back on the show for us to talk about his novella because I'm super excited about it. I cannot wait to read it. And also, I'm sure we will be hearing him again on the Grey Rooms. Hopefully season 4. I don't know. I don't have any information on that, but we'll see as time goes on. If you have not checked out the Grey Rooms, it is, in my opinion, the best audio drama podcast out there. It's a horror audio drama, a horror anthology audio drama. You need to check it out. It is absolutely incredible. The sound design, the voice acting, the writing, just it is really a cut above, in my opinion. So go check it out. The Grey Rooms. You can find it anywhere you find your podcast, just like you can find this podcast. And I appreciate you guys listening. Thank you so very much. It means the world to me. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet. Give me a follow and leave a little rating if you can. Ratings help a lot. They help this show grow. Helps more people find this podcast. And if you're into music and just general fun chats about life and content creation and things of that nature, be sure to check out some of my past episodes. I have well over a solid 313 episodes to go back and check out. A lot of great content in there with some really fantastic people. So thank you so very much for listening to me ramble at the end of the podcast here. For that, you deserve the old patented audio fist bump exclusive here to the Harder Show. Boom. What other idiot would punch their microphone? Just me. All right. I'm getting delusional, so I'm going to sign off here. Thank you guys so very much again for listening. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, share with your friends, let everyone know how great of a writer Arthur is and how amazing the Grey Rooms is. And maybe give your boy a follow on the social media, The Harder Show, and I will catch you next time right here every Thursday on The Harder Show. Take it easy, guys.